Alright, this is the last of the ecology videos in this series. We're going to be talking about succession and nutrient cycles. Okay, so first of all, succession deals with changes occurring in an environment, and it's going to be following some sort of a disturbance, whether it's a natural disturbance like a forest fire or a hurricane, or whether it's a man-made disturbance such as clear cutting or urbanization. So there are two different levels of succession we need to talk about. In primary succession, we are starting without soil present. That is a big key point here, okay? Without soil present. So what we're talking about is the disturbance was so severe that it scraped away all of the soil, or it left bare an area where there was no soil. For example, as glaciers are receding, the ice is going to scrape the soil, leaving just bare rock. A lava flow obviously is going to cover any soil, and drying lakes, the sediment and things like that are going to cover rich soil as well. So if there's no soil, how do we have new life move into an area? Well, luckily we have some pioneer species here that are able to survive in these early primary succession areas. And the main pioneer species is known as lichen, and it's actually a symbiotic relationship between a fungus and an algae. And so together what they will do is they will break down the rock, and in the breaking down of the rock they're going to form new soil. And once we have that new soil forming, that's going to allow for more species to move in. So here we see stage one, okay, let's say a glacier has come through this area, for example. You see we just have bare rock, okay, no life. Then in stage two here, the lichen has moved in. They're able to grow on the rock, and again, they're going to break it down. They're going to, grind it up, and they're going to die, and that's going to create new soil. Their bodies, these organisms, they will produce soil for us through their consumption of the rock and also through the death of their own bodies decomposing. So then once we have that, we move to stage three. And that is going to see, some short, stubby grasses and things like that, maybe some shrubs here or there. And eventually, stage four, we're going to get more complex growing greenery here. You'll see some trees. And then eventually, once we have that, we'll see more animal life. I would suspect that at this stage here, we probably have some basic insects moving in, and maybe some rodents or things like that as well. In secondary succession, there has been a disturbance, but fortunately the soil is still present. Now, this form of succession actually takes a very long time. So what we're going to see here is we're going to see a rebuilding of a community that was destroyed. Best example is going to be after a forest fire. Okay, after a forest fire, all of that old growth life has been burnt and shriveled down, but they have contributed to the layer of soil. So actually it's very rich and nutrient dense. So then we have our grasses and our herbs moving in. Next here you see short shrubs and little seedlings. And then we start to see that this area is going to mature again. But as you know, trees can take hundreds of years to mature, and forests that can be wiped out in seconds, took centuries to grow. So this will take a long amount of time. So when we create human disturbances, we need to think about the effects that we're having on the ecosystem around us. It only took us a day to clear cut that area so that we could use that land for farming, but it's going to take many years to get it back to the way it was before us. So here's a good question. Is succession a good thing? I found a great link on the Discovery Channel. I want you to go to the website, to my teacher website, find the link and watch the little video there, and then decide for yourself. And what you'll see here in this diagram that I want to show you is, we have a disturbance occurring. Okay, we have our species moving in, our intermediates, and then this is a good term to know, climax community. In other words, this is going to be when the ecosystem is at its most mature. So here is where we have, old growth forests like oak and hickory and things like that. Not going to be, very young. This is going to take, 150 plus years. So just think about those changes, decide whether you think succession can be a good thing or not. Okay, and our last topic that we're going to be talking about in ecology is going to be the cycles of nutrients. Oops, sorry about that. It's going to be the cycles of nutrients. So here, there are essential nutrients that cycle throughout our biosphere, and they go back and forth between living and non-living things. Just like energy, matter, which is the stuff that we're made of, we don't create it, we don't destroy it, it just changes form. So again, think about that, when organisms die, their bodies are decomposed, they may be broken apart and not recognized as body parts anymore, but those individual chemicals, those individual pieces of matter are going to be reused again in some other way. So if you think about it in a way, we are drinking the same water and breathing the same air, as dinosaurs did, millions of years ago, because it's just a cycle. It's moving through all living and non-living things. So some major cycles we're going to focus on: the water cycle, carbon, nitrogen, and phosphorus. The water cycle, I know you have spent a lot of time learning about that in middle school. We're just going to highlight some key parts of that, and then we'll talk about why each of these cycles are important to living things. So the water cycle, key parts here that we're going to look at. Sorry about that. There are different stages within the water cycle, and remember, it's a cycle, so there's technically no starting point. But just for argument's sake, let's start here by talking about evaporation. That's when we're going to have water changing form through the use of heat. So the water is going to be heated, whether it's on the surface of the ocean or whether it's on the surface of the land, and lakes and things like that. And it's going to change from a liquid to a gas. So this is where it's going to enter into the atmosphere. Also, transpiration. If you transpire, that's sort of another way of saying sweating. Transpiration is the way that plants are going to sweat or release water. And when they release it from their leaves, they release it through those stomata openings. Remember, there were those guard cells that squeeze to allow CO2 in, but they also push water out as well. The water, when it is on the surface of the leaves, it then will be heated by the sun as well, and it will evaporate through transpiration. So both evaporation and transpiration change liquid water into gas so that it may enter into the atmosphere. Well, once water is in a vapor form, gas, in the atmosphere, how does it move around? Well, as it cools from being up in the atmosphere, it's going to turn back into a liquid, and that process is known as condensing. We see evidence of this. You'll see condensation on a window when you're in a car or something like that, or if you're boiling a pot of water. Okay, if you place a clear glass lid on top, what's going to happen is you're going to see the vapors, the liquid water in the pot is going to change into a gas. It's going to hit the surface, and then it's going to condense. So up away from the heat source, it's going to be able to cool down, and so then it's going to condense back into a liquid. So this is known as condensation, and this is actually how we are able to form clouds. And I don't know a lot about clouds, so if you have questions about, the cumulus nimbus and stuff like that, I encourage you to research that a little bit more to see how different clouds can be formed. So once we have a cloud formed, it's full of this, heavy water. Eventually there needs to be a release of that water, and that will be in the form of precipitation. So some form of water falling from the sky and the atmosphere back down to earth, and that can be in the form of rain, snow, sleet, or hail. Here's a nice diagram just showing the key points here, so let's highlight the ones that we were just talking about. All right, here is our evaporation coming from large bodies of water. We're also going to see evapotranspiration or transpiration, so they're showing that coming off of plants from land. Both of those things are bringing water vapor up into the atmosphere. Okay, and then here we have condensation occurring, which is our cloud formation. The water is in the clouds, and then eventually precipitation occurs and that water is released. Now this diagram contains a lot more pieces, looking at groundwater and seepage and looking at runoff and things like that. That's not necessary for you to understand, but again, if you're interested, feel free to look more into those. All right, the carbon cycle has been in our news lately in the past several years because we found that some of our human activities are releasing excess carbon into the atmosphere, and this is causing a major imbalance in the carbon cycle, which is having more effect than we had originally thought it would. So carbon dioxide is obviously going to travel in and out of us through, oh, I don't know, respiration, right? Okay, so we create carbon dioxide as a byproduct of respiration and we give it off. We know that plants take in carbon dioxide, but there are other sources as well. For example, decomposition, that's going to be releasing carbon dioxide. Erosion will release carbon dioxide as well. Photosynthesis, that's going to be taking in carbon dioxide. So there are lots of different arrows going back and forth, but the key thing here to understand is there's a balance, okay? There's a natural balance between the amount of carbon dioxide in the air and the amount of carbon dioxide that has been dissolved in water. And unfortunately, human activities such as digging up these fossil fuels down here and burning them is releasing more carbon dioxide into our air. And that balance is causing a variety of different things, namely global climate change. So it's having a major effect. All right, the nitrogen cycle, important in amino acid and protein building. We know that because our proteins contain carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and nitrogen, which makes them very special. Nitrogen is interesting because it comes in different forms depending on where it's found. For example, in the atmosphere, it's found as N2, which is a gas. But unfortunately, our bodies can't take in N2. And so what we need to do is we need to find a way to change it into NH3. Okay, it's another form of nitrogen, but a form of nitrogen that our bodies can take in. So we need to rely on some very important little guys right here, okay, big zone in on this area here. Bacteria that are specialized in nitrogen fixation. They live on the roots of plants and they're going to take in atmospheric nitrogen and they're going to fix it so that it changes into NH3. Then the plants take in that nitrogen and then obviously nitrogen is going to work its way up through the food chain, and that's how it's going to get to other organisms. Okay, in order to release it back into the air, we then need denitrification bacteria that are going to help us decompose, and they're going to convert the nitrogen that was in our bodies back into atmospheric nitrogen. So what's very interesting here is the role that bacteria play, the essential role that bacteria play in our nitrogen cycle. And lastly here, okay, looking at the phosphorus cycle. The phosphorus cycle, just as complex as the other ones. Phosphorus is a little more important for our building blocks of DNA and RNA, so we definitely need it. One key difference here, little wink wink, nudge nudge, possible multiple choice question. Phosphorus is the only one of the nutrients that never enters the atmosphere. It cycles from organisms and then through decomposition is released back into the soil and rock and then back through organisms. So it never actually enters the air. Again, we're going to use bacteria here to assist us in the decomposition as it is going to cycle around. Okay, so that is the end of our ecology video lectures. Again, if you have any questions, please feel free to email me. I'd like to post the questions, so make sure you check the website. I'll be making little posts about things that students email, any interesting links we come up with. All right, thanks a lot.